I think taking responsibility, and I'm curious what you think that that looks like, is just staying, forcing oneself, forcing maybe is too not a nice word, but to be present with what's happening in your body and to do your own shadow work, really, to take responsibility for those parts of you that are like feeling incredibly vulnerable and threatened and demonized, and claiming them and integrating them and loving them so that you're not at least perpetuating it or projecting it or trying to disown it and make it someone else's problem. What is responsibility? What is taking responsibility for the lake? What does that look like for you?
Right. No, it's beautiful how you described it because I completely agree with you. There are certain parts of that lake, like when it's deep ocean, where we don't even know it seems like there is no bottom to it. So we don't even know how to ask stuff about it because there's no sensing, there's no feeling, there's no orientation. And seen from what we can see only a certain distance into the water, but like a certain depth into the water, but we can see further than that. That our senses don't allow that. And I have seen this literally. I felt that with multiple groups when we went and we did this Holocaust, Second World War integration processes with Jewish people and German people in the room, and like there were moments when I could literally feel and see the end of the conscious universe, like that we couldn't sense beyond a certain quality in the room because we were so in this lake in of collective defense mechanisms that shut down or anesthetize pain. And without that, and we need that, it's very important. If we were released, like if that were released at once, it would be terrible. It would affect millions of people. It cannot. We can. So we need that also. We need that shut down, but we also need to develop technologies, social or cultural technologies, to begin to titrate and soften and open that step by step. So for us to increase our current perception, and and so it's true. At the same time, we don't need to start with what's the most far. We can come back to our life and say, how often do I say things when I feel it wasn't fully true? How often do I do things when I know, it actually hurt somebody a bit, but I don't go there and repair it? How often do I XYZ, many things, where I feel I can take more responsibility in the moment? How often do we become reactive and it hurts somebody around us, but we don't come back and say, listen, I'm sorry. I know I overreacted. I didn't mean it, and I'm really sorry about it. And so from subtle dishonesties, so to not have a conflict, to not do like to make it a little bit round the corners, to lying in relationships. People have other relationships and don't say it to their partner. Their partner feels something but feels very confused. It distorts our intuition, and it's not honest. And it's selfish because I want to keep something in place and I don't dare and fear, whatever it is, whatever my childhood trauma maybe makes me not say it, but it doesn't matter. It's me acting like that. And so there are ways that are much closer than the large trauma that we look at in our society, that we can bring closer home and say, I begin to work on the stuff that I can work on, and we will all find something, I'm sure, that we can refine, that we can refine, and we can refine. And in the spiritual practice, we call this you begin to live and create the world around you that you really want to be living in. And so every one of us is an individual, but is also an ecosystem. All our interactions, all the people that we know, everything that we put out into the world, everything that we put out on social media creates a world. If I put out very polarizing content, I will live in a polarized world because I'm co-creating it. If I act from a different level of maturity, I will live in a more mature world. We are all creating, partly co-creating the world that we live in. And if in my own sphere of influence it looks like that, so then I need to start here and not talk about them. I can do the work. So it starts from here, and then of course we can stay in the narrative that it's hard to take responsibility for example the ancestral participation in slavery or racism, but that is also often a simple exit door to say maybe we can all create a deeper conversation without going into deep blame or deep trauma. We can create conversations, cultural conversations about how we experience that. And I think like how we experience the legacy that we were born into, and create conversations, not even deep trauma work, just conversations to move that and to develop collective spaces that can start to move some of that energy, bring more insights in, also notice where it becomes uncomfortable and stay there a bit longer and be together. So there are ways to do it, even if
Yeah.
we can, and then there is a deeper ownership, because I believe what we call evil in the world is partly the creation of disowned atrocities, disowned aspects. And you are right, because it's not that what our ancestors did is what we did. We didn't do that, but our responsibility is ability to respond to that action. And if I cannot look there, because when I look there, I find a moral conflict in myself, that moral conflict is my work. Not
Yes.
that my grandparents were in the Second World War, but my relationship to my grandparents being in the Second World War, that's my work. I
Yeah.
didn't make decisions at that time. But if I cannot look there, I anesthetize my past, and I am part of that lake.
I think about this. I laugh at myself all the time, in part because I think particularly right now, and obviously I read a whole book about goodness and clinging to this idea of goodness and using it as a shield against the world as a form of protection. But that, I laugh when I drive my kids to school and I'm like, oh, I'm so irritated with a driver who cuts me off. And then within like 45 seconds, I've cut someone else off. But yet we don't witness ourselves as not living up to our values, um, or perpetuating the same things that we hate. I think too often about this idea of the life review that people talk about experiencing and near death experiences, or that might be part of what happens when we die, where we get sort of this like um receipt, this reckoning, in both positive and negative ways. And there's part of me that's like, oh, what wouldn't be, this would be overwhelming, this is not a good idea. But to have some sort of 23andMe database, Thomas, where you could pull up sort of your entire ancestral line and see their sort of quote unquote moral crimes, or what might they might have been participant in, and where they might have been a victim and where they might have been a victimizer. And in part because everyone's list would be long, and there are no, I think anything to put to mind, to put to rest this idea that there are clear victims and victimizers, and that there's a way to align yourself with the victim pool, I guess, without taking any ownership over who you in turn have hurt. Um, anyway, it's a morbid idea, but I think it would be revelatory for people to recognize, like you, as you've said, like you can't run from this. It doesn't mean that you have to embrace it all or attend to it in one afternoon, but part of it is just relaxing, releasing into this idea of, yeah, I don't always live up to my highest values because I'm human. And that is part of this process of trying to work towards some sort of wholeness. is this ongoing embrace of shadow and recognizing like there is no perfection. Perfection is not part of wholeness. And the more you run, the longer the shadow gets.